Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling utterly drained, as if you've just run a marathon you never signed up for? You said everything you needed to say, you laid out your arguments logically, you defended your position with passion, yet you still felt a profound sense of defeat. It's a hollow feeling, a quiet recognition that despite all the noise you made, you weren't truly heard. And worse, you lost a piece of yourself in the exchange. What if the entire premise of how we engage with others is flawed, and the secret to real power, influence, and unshakable self-possession lies not in what you say, but in what you choose not to? We are raised in a world that worships the spoken word. From school debates to corporate boardrooms, we are taught that victory belongs to the most articulate, the quickest thinker, the one with a final, clever rebuttal. We believe that silence is a vacuum, a sign of weakness, an admission of having nothing valuable to contribute. So we rush to fill it. We interrupt, we over-explain, we argue with strangers on the internet, all in a desperate attempt to assert our existence and prove our worth. We are terrified of being misunderstood, of being overlooked, of being deemed irrelevant in the constant cacophony of modern life. But this frantic need to speak is a trap, a carefully constructed illusion that keeps us perpetually on the defensive. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, a master diagnostician of the human soul, saw this with piercing clarity. He understood that the person who feels a compulsive need to justify themselves has already surrendered their power. They are reacting, not acting. They are seeking validation from the very person they are trying to convince, placing the keys to their self-worth in the pocket of another. This relentless dance of argument and explanation is not a quest for truth. It is the ego's desperate plea for recognition. Nietzsche proposed a radical alternative, a path of power so subtle yet so profound that it remains hidden in plain sight. He saw silence not as an absence but as a presence, not as a shield but as a sword. It is a language of its own, one that communicates authority, control, and a depth of understanding that word can only hint at. When you master the art of strategic silence, you stop playing the game by everyone else's rules and start creating your own, a game where you hold all the cards and the other person doesn't even realize they are playing. This journey is for those who are tired of feeling small in loud rooms, for those who feel their energy being siphoned away by pointless debates and emotional manipulators. It is for anyone who has ever confused their quiet nature with submission, their thoughtfulness with hesitation. Today, we will dismantle the myth that power is loud. We will explore the psychological depths of Nietzsche's thought to forge your silence into your most formidable weapon, an instrument of such precision that you can command respect, disarm opponents, and reshape your reality without uttering a single word. To begin, we must first understand the battlefield, which is a human mind itself. Most conversations are not dialogues, they are competing monologues. Each person is waiting for their turn to speak, not to understand, but to impose their own narrative. They are not listening to your words. They are listening for a gap, an opening to launch their next volley of opinions. This is the fundamental error we make. We assume the purpose of communication is the exchange of ideas, when for most people, it is merely the reinforcement of their own identity. When you argue, you are validating this framework. You are accepting the premise that the person with the most persuasive words wins. But Nietzsche would argue that this is a game designed for the herd, for those who derive their sense of self from a consensus of the group. The need to be right in the eyes of another is what he called a symptom of herd morality, a deep-seated fear of being an outsider, of being different, of being alone in your convictions. It is a fear of the lone wolf being cast out by the sheep. Think about the physical and mental cost of this constant verbal warfare. The racing heart before a difficult conversation, the mental rehearsals of what you're going to say, the obsessive replaying of the argument in your mind afterward, wondering if you should have said something different. This is a state of perpetual anxiety, a self-imposed prison of reactivity. You are living your life according to a script written by others, responding to cues, waiting for your lines, and constantly being judged on your performance. True freedom begins when you refuse to even take the stage. The person who needs to shout to feel powerful is revealing the very emptiness they are trying to conceal. Their volume is a measure of their insecurity. Their rapid-fire arguments are a smokescreen for a fragile ego that cannot withstand the silence of scrutiny. They build a fortress of words around themselves, believing it makes them impenetrable. But Nietzsche knew that these walls are made of glass. The truly powerful individual needs no such fortress because they are the fortress themselves, built of the silent, unbreakable stone of self-knowledge. This internal fortress is not built overnight. It is forged in the fires of self-observation. It begins by recognizing the impulse to speak for what it is, a conditioned reflex, a twitch of the ego. When someone challenges you, criticizes you, or misunderstands you, notice that jolt inside you, that immediate urge to correct, to defend, to clarify. This is the moment of choice. The herd instinct screams, speak, defend yourself. Don't let them get away with it. But the path to power whispers, wait, observe, let the wave pass. Let's imagine a scenario to make this concrete. Consider a young professional named Alex, who has been working tirelessly on a project proposal. He enters a high-stakes meeting with senior executives, his mind filled with data, innovative ideas, and a genuine belief that his plan can revolutionize the department. He begins his presentation, but is quickly interrupted by a more senior, notoriously loud colleague named Mark. Mark doesn't attack the idea's substance. Instead, he uses corporate jargon and rhetorical questions to pick at minor details, creating an atmosphere of doubt. He speaks quickly, confidently, and fills every available space with his voice. Alex, feeling the pressure, falls into the trap. He becomes defensive, trying to counter every point, speaking faster, his voice rising in pitch. He is drawn into Mark's game, a rapid-fire tennis match of words where the goal is not to find the best solution but to score points. The other executives watch, and their perception is shaped not by the quality of Alex's idea, but by the dynamic of the conversation. They see Alex as reactive and flustered, and Mark as dominant and in control. Alex leaves a meeting defeated, his brilliant idea lost in the noise, feeling completely and utterly powerless. Now, let's rewind this scene and imagine Alex has been studying this philosophy of silence. He begins his presentation as before, and Mark interrupts with the same aggressive tactics. But this time, instead of reacting, Alex does something unexpected. He stops. He falls silent. He looks at Mark, not with anger or fear, but with a calm, focused attention. He lets the interruption hang in the air, creating a moment of palpable tension. The silence stretches for a few seconds, which feels like an eternity in a corporate boardroom. In that silence, the dynamic shifts entirely. All eyes turn to Mark, whose aggressive words now echo in the quiet room, suddenly sounding hollow and needlessly combative. The other executives are no longer watching a debate. They are witnessing a moment of profound social imbalance. Mark, denied the reaction he expected and thrives on, becomes visibly uncomfortable. He might add a weak, "I'm just playing devil's advocate," trying to soften his attack, but the damage is done. He has revealed himself. Alex, without saying a word, has exposed Mark's aggression and reclaimed control of the room. He then calmly turns back to the group and says, "That's an interesting perspective. As I was detailing the financial model, he has not won an argument. He has transcended it. This is the power we are talking about. It is the ability to reframe any interaction not by adding more words, but by strategically withdrawing them. Silence is a cognitive disruptor. It breaks the expected rhythm of social exchange, forcing the other person's brain to stop and reassess the situation. They are prepared for a fight, a debate, a verbal joust. They are not prepared for a void. This cognitive vacuum creates a profound sense of unease, and in their desperation to fill it, they often reveal their true intentions, their hidden insecurities, and the weaknesses in their own position. Silence transforms you from a participant in the drama to an observer of it. You are no longer on the stage, flailing under the hot lights. You are in the audience, watching the play unfold with detached clarity. From this vantage point, you see things you could never see before. You notice the subtle flicker of doubt in the eyes of the overconfident speaker. You hear the faint note of desperation in the voice of the bully. You perceive the unspoken fears that motivate the manipulator. You are no longer reacting to their words. You are perceiving their soul. This is what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of developing a third eye, the ability to see beyond the superficial surface of things. The incessant chatter of our own minds and the constant need to engage in verbal sparring blind us to these deeper realities. By cultivating inner and outer silence, you clean the lens of your perception. You begin to understand that what people say is often the least important part of their communication. Their tone, their body language, the things they avoid saying, this is where the truth resides. Consider the power of the pause in a negotiation. One party states their price. The other party doesn't immediately counter. They don't gasp or argue. They simply remain silent, letting the number hang in the air. This silence communicates a wealth of information without a single word. It can suggest disappointment, deep consideration, or that the offer is so far from acceptable that it doesn't even warrant a verbal response. The person who made the offer starts to second-guess themselves. Is my price too high? Did I misread the situation? They become anxious and often rush to fill the silence by preemptively lowering their price or adding concessions, literally negotiating against themselves. Or think of an unjust accusation. Someone in your life, a family member or colleague, accuses you of something you didn't do, their voice filled with righteous anger. The natural impulse is a frantic, panicked defense. I didn't do it. How could you think that? Let me explain. But this desperation often reads as guilt. Instead, imagine meeting that accusation with a powerful, unwavering silence. You hold their gaze, your face calm, your posture strong. You simply let them finish, allowing their toxic words to dissipate into the quiet space between you. This lack of reaction is profoundly unsettling for the accuser. It robs them of the emotional conflict they crave. Your silence non-verbally communicates. Your reality is not my reality. Your drama has no power over me. At that moment, you are no longer the accused. You are the judge, and they are the ones squirming under the weight of their own baseless claims. This is the essence of what Nietzsche might call master morality in action. It is a morality of the sovereign individual who creates their own values and lives by their own internal code. This individual does not seek approval from the herd because their sense of worth is self-generated. Their silence is not a result of fear or an inability to speak. It is a conscious choice, an expression of their inner freedom. This is the ideal of the Übermensch or overman, not a biological superman, but a psychologically evolved human who has overcome the petty, reactive nature that defines a majority. The Übermensch does not engage in battles of ego because they have transcended their ego's need for constant validation. They observe the world's frantic dance of pride and insecurity with a kind of amused detachment. They know that true strength is not the ability to defeat others in an argument, but the ability to not need the argument in the first place. Their presence alone is enough to command respect. Their silence is more articulate than another's speech. It is a silence filled with intention, with power, with a deep and abiding self-possession. To embody this ideal, you must undertake the difficult inner work of detaching your identity from the opinions of others. This is the great challenge. We are social creatures, and the desire for belonging is wired into our DNA. But Nietzsche challenges us to go beyond this biological programming. He asks us to find a deeper source of validation within ourselves, to become our own source of approval. This means learning to tolerate being misunderstood. It means being able to stand firm in your convictions even when faced with ridicule or disbelief. This process begins with mindfulness, with a practice of observing your own emotional reactions without being consumed by them. When you feel that familiar surge of anger, defensiveness, or anxiety, learn to simply notice it. Acknowledge it as a chemical reaction in your body, a ghost of an ancient survival instinct, but do not grant it the power to control your actions or your words. Create a space between the stimulus and your response. In that sacred space lies your freedom and your power. This is a training ground for the warrior of silence. Let's consider another story, that of a woman named Clara, who has spent her life as a consummate people-pleaser. Her identity is built on being seen as kind, agreeable, and accommodating. She avoids conflict at all costs, often silencing her own needs and opinions to maintain harmony. As a result, she is often taken for granted. Her boundaries are constantly crossed, and she harbors a deep, simmering resentment that eats away at her from the inside. She is a perfect example of what Nietzsche called slave morality, making a virtue out of the qualities that keep one weak and subservient. One evening, Clara is at a tense family dinner. A particularly critical relative begins to make passive-aggressive comments about her career choices, thinly veiled as concerned advice. In the past, Clara would have jumped to defend herself, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and a desperate need for approval. She would have explained her reasoning, listed her achievements, and tried to win over the relative, an effort that always ended with her feeling small and exhausted. But tonight is different. For weeks, Clara has been practicing the art of non-reaction. As the relative's criticism lands, Clara feels a familiar, hot flush of adrenaline. The old script begins to run in her head. But this time, she does not speak. She simply puts down her fork, takes a quiet breath, and looks directly at the relative. She doesn't smile to soften the moment, nor does she frown in anger. Her expression is neutral. Her gaze is steady. She just listens. The silence that follows is deafening. The relative, expecting a defense or an argument, is left hanging, their critical words exposed and ugly in the sudden quiet. The relative falters, stammering, "Well, I'm just saying, I worry about you." They are trying to regain control, to elicit the emotional response they are used to getting from Clara. But Clara offers them nothing. She simply nods slowly and says, in a calm, level voice, "I've heard you." She doesn't agree. She doesn't disagree. She doesn't justify. She simply acknowledges that sound waves have entered her ears. She has given the relative nothing to push against, no emotional hook to latch onto. The attack has been completely neutralized. For the first time, Clara walks away from a family gathering not feeling drained and defeated, but feeling centered, calm, and powerful in control of her own inner world. This transformation from reactive to responsive is the heart of this philosophy. It is a shift from being a pawn in other people's emotional games to being the serene and untouchable master of your own. However, it is absolutely critical to understand the profound difference between this strategic, powerful silence and the silence of submission. They may look the same on the surface, but internally, they are universes apart. One is a cage, the other is a key to liberation. The silence of submission is born of fear. It is the silence of the employee who is afraid to speak up against an abusive boss. It is the silence of the partner who swallows their pain to avoid a fight. This silence feels heavy, oppressive, and diminishing. When you are silent out of fear, your body language reflects it. Your shoulders slump, your gaze drops, you physically try to make yourself smaller. This silence is a silent scream of surrender, and it gives all of your power away. It reinforces the idea, both to yourself and to others, that you are not worthy of being heard. The silence of power, in contrast, is born of choice and inner strength. It is a silence of the leader who listens to all opinions before making a final, decisive judgment. It is the silence of the parent who allows their child's tantrum to burn out without adding fuel to the fire. This silence feels expansive, calm, and commanding. When you are silent from a place of power, your posture is upright and relaxed, your gaze is steady, and you project an aura of unshakable presence. This silence is a declaration of sovereignty. It says, "I am in control of myself, and therefore you cannot control me." To discern which silence you are practicing, you must become a student of your own internal state. When you choose not to speak, ask yourself, am I silent because I am afraid of the consequences of speaking, or because I see that speaking will be a waste of my energy and a surrender of my strategic advantage? Am I holding my tongue to keep a false peace, or am I holding my position from a place of unassailable strength? The answer to these questions will reveal whether your silence is a weapon or a wound. Furthermore, we must acknowledge that this philosophy is not a call for absolute, perpetual silence. That would be a lifeless and disconnected existence. The Übermensch is not a silent statue. They are a vibrant, engaged creator of their own life. The key is not to never speak, but to speak with intention, precision, and purpose. When the individual who has mastered silence finally chooses to speak, their words carry an immense weight. They are not part of the background noise. They are a singular, powerful event. There are moments when speaking up is a moral imperative. When you see injustice, when you need to protect the vulnerable, when a fundamental truth must be declared. The difference is that the choice to speak comes from the same place of inner power and control. It is not a knee-jerk reaction driven by outrage or fear. It is a deliberate, calculated act. Your words become tools you wield with surgical precision, not emotional grenades you toss indiscriminately. Having mastered silence, you understand the true value and impact of words, and you use them sparingly and effectively, like a master archer who needs only one arrow to hit the bullseye. We have journeyed from the noisy battlefield of everyday conversation to the serene inner citadel of the self-possessed individual. We have seen how the compulsive need to speak is a trap of the ego, a symptom of the herd's fear. We have dismantled the illusion that words equal power and replaced it with Nietzsche's profound insight. True power lies in the mastery of silence, the ability to remain an unmoved mover in a world of frantic reactivity. The silence of the Übermensch is not an absence of sound, but a fullness of presence. It is the calm at the eye of the hurricane. It is a deep, quiet confidence of someone who has nothing to prove because their worth is not up for debate. This is not a mere communication technique. It is a way of being. It is the outward expression of a radical inner freedom, a declaration that you are the sole author of your own experience, and you will no longer allow the noise of the world to write your story for you. Look back at your life, at all the energy you have expended in futile arguments, the anxiety you have suffered from caring too much about being understood and approved by others. That energy is your life force. It is time to reclaim it. Your silence must cease to be a refuge for your fear and must become the throne of your power. It must be a boundary, a statement, an unwavering affirmation of your right to exist on your own terms. This is your moment of choice. Will you continue to be a reactive echo in a world of noise, or will you choose to become a commanding presence, a force of nature whose power is felt long before it is heard? The path is not easy. It requires courage, discipline, and the willingness to be profoundly misunderstood by the herd. But the reward is the greatest prize of all, the mastery of yourself. If you are ready to commit to this path, to transform your relationship with silence and with yourself, make a declaration. Go to the comments and write, "My silence is my strength." This is not for me, this is for you. It is a public affirmation of your commitment to stop playing small, to reclaim your power, and to build your own inner fortress. And as you continue on this journey, don't stop here. The video that follows will build on these ideas, taking you deep into the art of mental mastery. Click on it, not for the algorithm, but for your own evolution. Remember, anyone can make noise, and most people do. It takes nothing to react, to argue, to add to the chaos, but to hold a powerful, intentional silence in the face of provocation. That is the mark of a master. The weak shout to be heard.